Hi, I'm David Weiss. In 2017, I published Take the Phi Road, a book for personal and planetary transformation. In 2018, I started an informal video series. So if you haven't seen the first 3 videos, please go back and watch those now, as I unpack new terms and new semantics for old terms, which we will definitely use here. Later in 2018, I lost a family member, so I've just now gotten back into doing videos. Without further ado, here's the book. Yes, that's papyrus. If Avatar can do it, so can I. I was researching fonts for my new website recently, and I found out what a hated font this is. The degree of font snobbery. This font is so hated it's right up there with Comic Sans. I thought, this is ridiculous. We have enough problems with racism, sexism, now fontism. It drove me to an epiphany. Rather than chase this many-headed hydra of hate, let's deal with the core, fundamental trauma in human nature. That psychopathology, yes, psychopathology as in psychopath, that just makes us mean. And heal that, rather than chase after its many manifestations. We can legislate all day long, and we can legislate those isms until we're blue in the face, but look, it's going to find another way to express. We have to heal it. And it's not the competition that spurs us to greatness. That's a Phi aspect. It's the competition of scarcity, of separation, of survival. That's where Phi and non-Phi interface. So if we can stay on the Phi side of life, we're in much better shape. So that gets on to the picture. And now I went over this in the previous videos, but I'm doing a brief overview. The grass coming through is a representation of Phi, the unfolding fractal nature of life force, constantly unfolding, regenerative. The road represents non-Phi or static, non-regenerative patterns. Non-regenerative in that we have to maintain them. They're under our maintenance contract. Regenerative patterns like Phi, which you may have heard of the golden ratio, the golden spiral, Fibonacci, they all refer to the same pattern basically. Found in the galactic spirals, the spirals in seashells, and it's even in our DNA and in the structure of an atom. It's what inspires this proportion from here to here, the golden ratio, from here to here, the golden ratio. So I'm looking at the structures in our bodies, in our brains, as being carried by the golden ratio. At least that's a facet. And if that's a facet, then what about the processes that invigorate these structures? We usually get caught up in structures, but do we look at flow processes, hormones, neurotransmitters, metabolic processes? So this has potential that our Phi nature is connected in with our emotions, our flow, the way we move, the way we think, our spirituality, our connection with God. And as researchers have pointed out that the DNA is a fractal antenna, well, that makes sense. If I want to feel recharged, I go out into nature or spend time in the company of loved ones, because we are Phi built. Yes, we've strayed. We've gotten into non-Phi. We're one of the few species, if not only, that does this. And so initially I cast a very wide net because I didn't want to scare away anybody who was afraid of religion. I didn't want to scare away atheists or evolutionists or even creationists with what I said, because it's something we all have in common. And as a point of unity, as we go inside and resonate our Phi, it helps us cultivate the inner truth, whether we say that our inner truth is connected to God or to Source, but it's a I want to say a barometer. And right now we need discernment more than ever. We're in such a divisive place. 2020 is such a crazy time. I call it the year of the Trojan horse. Groups espousing what they are not. By the way, my book, though, Palatino linotype, so maybe that's a reverse Trojan horse. The point is, we need to go inside, lighten up, inward focus instead of outward focus on being a victim. Because that's what happens. What we focus on, and I cover this in the other video, is what we beget, what we bring forth. Now, Phi has the interesting property as a fractal pattern. A fractal is a pattern that gives birth to itself, to another fractal pattern and another fractal pattern. An easy example would be an acorn creating oak trees creating acorns, and so on. It's sort of like a Russian doll where you have a little doll inside of a bigger doll inside of a bigger doll, except in this case all the dolls are connected and they are all giving birth to the next. They're paying it forward. This is the ultimate in passing the torch, paying it forward. That's Phi. Non-Phi is the road that lays on top of all of this bustling energy coming forth. Without that road, we'd see grass and weeds and trees and other evidence of succession. But the road is the way we control it. We control our environments through our infrastructure, our non-Phi infrastructure. So we have to go out and mow the yard or pave the road or drive up and down it. As long as we drive up and down it or pave it, the grass doesn't come through very much. But if we neglect it, it comes through. That's the Phi non-Phi interface. Now, how is that applicable? Our habits, our bad habits, are those things that we drive up and down every day. And often it's because we have a degree of external focus, whether it's on our mental virtual reality shelf or whether it's really outside into our external world. And so as we go back inside and cultivate our inner truth and back away and we stop attaching to our habits, we can change. So on a personal level, this has tremendous benefit. On a collective level, great benefit, because we can transform society in a very positive way, more loving, don't take ourselves so seriously, a lot, and maybe the way we use energy. I mean, this is a hub with many spokes. I mean, there's spokes going into agriculture and education and healthcare that we could potentially tap into. So this is where I can see it going, as I said, but we need discernment more than ever right now, so we don't, so we just don't implode. It's very important. So where did this start? We have mythologies that talk about a fall from grace, religions that talk about the Garden of Eden, and it matches up. It really does. That's my theory. I think it matches up perfectly. Because if you imagine for a moment that you're in the Garden of Eden, everything is in a state of flow, a state of grace. And then you've somehow separated. And a tree of knowledge? That's interesting, because that is where I see the Phi non-Phi split happening, is in the mind, or the mental body, we call it. But as we go outside and look for truth out here, and we get into that, it'll say we go outside of the garden and we're in survival mode. Well, what is interesting about that is that there's an aspect of genetics called epigenetics, and as reported by Dr. Bruce Lipton in the book Biology of Belief, our epigenetics, which express an aspect of genetics, are influenced by our habits, our thinking, our feeling, our doing, and I'm thinking even our spirituality. So as we break from that point in Eden and we go outside, we are focusing on survival and lack and scarcity. And then as over generations, we continue to focus on lack and scarcity. It's basically like if you took an original and put it into one of those old Xerox machines that did an optical copy, and then you take the copy and you make a copy, and you do that 1,000 times, but each time you use the copy before it. After 1,000 generations, it doesn't even look the same. So that could shape our epigenetics in the way we potentially were living even right after the garden. The reported lifetimes were 800-900 years. So relative to where we are now, we might have had superpowers back then. And over time, we degraded through this external focus and chasing survival and chasing that. That's potentially what happened. So as we go inside and cultivate love, we can dial back our epigenetics. Now, how long will it take? 5 minutes? 5 million years? I don't know. But we can realize benefits right now. So that's another aspect of this. I'll also say too, I wasn't much into studying the Bible, but there is a verses, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, was it 13? 19. And it's the body is the temple for the Holy Spirit. So if the body is the temple for the Holy Spirit, that lines up with Phi as a resonant beacon for life force. And so that's another thing I'd talk about. Now, I may not always talk about religion, I may not always talk about the Bible, but it's interesting when I see how these things line up. So thanks for listening. Please tune in for more. It's hotter than heck here. So I'm going to end this one, and join me again in the next video. And I'm on Facebook, and I will either have one of two websites, thephiguy.com or takethephiroad.org. Thanks.